My mom was a social worker. My dad served in the Air Force. And like them, I felt called to public service. I am a licensed clinical social worker. I help people who are at their most vulnerable. Even before the pandemic, low wages, lack of opportunity, and the rising cost of healthcare and housing pushed people into despair. And then the pandemic hit. People are lapsing into addiction. Families are being evicted. The first responders I treat share their pain and exhaustion with me. My job is to listen and work with people who want to improve their lives. I found myself asking, who else is listening? Who can we count on to find solutions? That's when I decided to run for Congress. You can count on me to serve all the people of Western North Carolina, to work every day to find meaningful solutions to improve lives. I'm Bo Hess, and I approve this message because the people of Western North Carolina deserve a representative that listens to them.
Hi, everybody. I'm Aisha Adams, and I want to welcome you all to Bo's virtual campaign lunch. Now, let's get through a couple of housekeeping things. First of all, if you have any questions for Bo, I'm going to encourage you to leave them in the Facebook and YouTube comment section. And a lot of you are joining us from various platforms like Facebook, YouTube, or your website. Please share that with your networks because we all need to be listening. This is a very important event tonight. Bo really wants to have his first campaign event virtually so that all of the voters of Western North Carolina can be here today. This campaign isn't only going to big cities, right? Bo plans to go to every corner of the North Carolina District 11 to listen to all of his potential constituents, whether you support him or not. So it's important that we take the time to both listen and to talk to Bo. And the more listening to Bo, and more than listening to Bo, Bo wants to listen to you. After all, you are the people of Western North Carolina, and you are the people he is fighting to represent. That's why we've decided to donate so much of our time to your questions and answers. Now, let's dig in to more of Bo's background and specifics on the campaign. But before we do that, let me tell you a little bit about myself, in case you don't know me. I'm Aisha Adams, and I am a resident of North Carolina District 11, and I care about what happens here. I show up in communities to cultivate spaces of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I've been recently asking the hard questions to our candidates. So I'm super excited to be here this evening to spend some time with Bo, to chat with him, and to get to know him better. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce to you the fabulous Bo Hess. Hey.
Hey, Aisha, how are you?
I'm doing well. All right. So before we even get into your background, I guess my most burning question that I want to ask you, since I have the floor tonight, is there's so many people running for this particular office. Why you? Why now? Why should the voters be listening tonight?
Thank you. So, great question. There are a lot of talented people running. I respect anyone who decides to stand up for their country and, of course, serve the people of Western North Carolina. I am different. I'm not a politician. I'm not rich. I'm an everyday working person who really
had a lot of great ideas and would write letters, and kind of like yourself, show up to community, organize around certain things. But I constantly was hearing, I wasn't hearing anything, but also people would say, you just have to find the political will, you just got to get in good with this person. And I decided that I would go ahead and be that political will. And I think that more everyday working people should be running for Congress and for office, so that when legislation comes across our desk or when we're voting on legislation, we know how it affects the everyday working person. And that's one of the things. I don't have a name for myself, and that's what we're building right now. I'm not rich, but that's why, we need all the people on the ground to help support us bring back real representation to WNC.
I love it. So now let's go back to the beginning, right? Tell me all about you. Who's your mom and dad? How many siblings do you have? Like, tell us who you are. What's your story?
Yeah, so I was born Lubbock, Texas. My mom is a fifth generation Texan. Dad's a fifth generation from Michigan. Dad was also in the Air Force. Reese Air Force Base was in Lubbock, Texas. And I spent all my childhood actually going from base to base until we got to North Carolina. I finished out high school and then quickly after came to Western North Carolina and have been here ever since. My mom is a social worker. And my dad is in the Air Force. And so both of them have solid foundations of service. In fact, on both my mom's side and my dad's side, there are other service members. And so I'm proud to just keep that legacy going. I'm also a licensed clinical social worker as well. And so one of the things I do is work with the people of Western North Carolina and their families through some tough times. And so I hear a lot of the behind the scenes, kind of what doesn't make the news, I hear. And those are the people who I want to work for. I've never asked any of my patients, oh, do you have an R, or do you have a D behind your name, or who did you vote for in last election? Because that's not important, right? We're all Americans. And I think ultimately we want the same things. And, we have a campaign of 3 pillars. And these are really kind of the values that I endear, safety in our community and streets, making sure that everyone has a living wage, and making sure that everyone has access to affordable quality mental health and healthcare.
Wow, that's very admirable. Tell me, so you told me that you were a social worker, and I do think we are really hearing a lot in the news about how social workers are sort of like been left out of the fabric of problem solving in a lot of ways when they could be used more effectively and more efficiently. So tell me more about your educational background and how you think that will help you if given this position.
Yes. So I have an associate's in human services, technology, and substance use counseling from a community college. I have a bachelor's in social work and also a master's in social work. I went on to do 2 years post-grad supervision and clinical work, and now am fully licensed clinical social worker and addiction specialist. And you brought up a great point in that social workers are trained in problem solving. That's what I do every day. I listen to people without judgment, meeting them where they're at, understanding, okay, what is affecting their life, and then putting practical solutions that they can use right then. And also looking at the bigger picture too, so looking at the systemic issues, looking at all of the things that even fed into this issue that's presenting in my office at the moment. And so we have the ability to really focus on short-term problem solving while also keeping the broader goal in mind of what we're ultimately working for.
So just to be sure here, you are a psychiatrist.
No. So
Clear it
psychiatrists.
up for me.
Yeah, and this is something that a lot of people don't they go to a psychiatrist expecting therapy, and they go to a therapist expecting medication. So a psychiatrist is a medical doctor who typically is trained in therapeutic modalities but will prescribe medications, whereas a therapist, a licensed psychotherapist, will work on emotional, behavioral, the thoughts and kind of that aspect of it. So the best practice is kind of having both pieces.
Awesome. And you work at an acute psychiatric hospital, but you own your own practice. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am. I do have a small private practice. Much like many of the people in Western North Carolina, I can't sustain on just one job, so I got to work extra. And so I've been there doing that now. And while launching a campaign with a wonderful team, but yes, working every day with severe mental illness. And this is our psychosis, our bipolar, severe addiction, homicide, suicide. And then private practice is a little more tame, work with digital addiction and personality disorders. And I also work with a lot of first responders in trauma.
Yeah, I think that skill set of problem solving around those specific issues is much needed in our community. I think that it's important to have small business owners advocating for other small business owners. So I'm really glad to hear about that. So I'm sure voters are wondering, what's the focal point of your campaign? I'm assuming it's these 3 pillars, but tell us more.
Mm-hmm. Yes, these 3 pillars of safety in our community, access to affordable mental and health care, and then also a living wage, access to dignity of a work and a living wage. But ultimately, the focal point of this is the people of WNC and just listening to their concerns and just listening to where they're at, listening to where they want to go, and really making sure that Western North Carolina is not left out of the next generation of jobs. We have the most creative, the most talented, the hardest working people here in WNC. And there's no reason why these companies can't be bringing the work here when we want that.
Awesome. So I guess my next question for you is, this is your first virtual event, but you've officially kicked off this campaign. What's been the hardest part of this? And then what's been the most rewarding? Like, what's good? What's bad? Tell us all about it.
Yeah. So the hardest part, I think, is putting myself out there and my face and my name everywhere. I think that, I recognize that that's a big piece of the job and advocating, but, definitely going out of my comfort zone, and then not really recognizing how much asking people to contribute money to our campaign was a central piece of making this successful. And just reaching out to people that you don't know, that may like you, that may not like you, that may be supporting the opposition and you have no idea. That's been kind of the hardest part. The most rewarding part, though, has been all the feedback that I've been getting, all the emails, all the private messages, all the DMs, all the feedback, just saying, we support you, we see you out there. And so that's encouraging.
I'm really excited about the number of people who are running, and I'm meeting some of the most interesting candidates on both sides. I think it's going to be a really interesting race. But you mentioned the hard part was financing. So I want to just be clear here, but you're not taking money from any corporations or PACs? Any PACs?
No.
So how do you plan to do this? How is this going to work for us, Bo?
I know the opposition is certainly the PAC guy, right?
Right.
Pac-Man. So basically, I'm counting on the people of Western North Carolina, the hardworking people, $5, $10, $1. Anything helps us kind of build an opposition that is formidable, that we can get great ideas out there, that we can bring real representation. So I'm counting on the everyday people of WNC and other supporters to, chip in and to help us.
Wow, that's very admirable. I like this idea just of bringing dignity into the space of campaigning and leaving it to the people. What do you think of our current political climate? And do you think we can get back to a place where, even if we can't all agree, that we can all work together?
Yes, I absolutely do think. And just like going back to what you said, I think the more people, the more ideas, the healthier our democracy, right? We don't want to all be thinking, acting, doing the same thing. That's communism, right? And our opposition kind of seems to want that, and we want people to be free to think how they want, to do what they want, and to not infringe on other people. And so, absolutely.
Awesome. So let's talk a little bit about some specific issues. So you talked a little bit about a thriving wage, and you also talked about the importance of small business. How in this role will you advocate and support those things?
Absolutely. So one of the major things I want to do is making sure that small business owners aren't tied up with government regulation and policy. Government right now is over-regulating certain businesses and then really letting other businesses run amok, right? But I do think that there is a nuanced way to raise the minimum wage to $15 where it doesn't hurt businesses. For example, looking at tax incentives, looking at other structures that provide those incentives back to the business until they reach a certain profitability or a certain number of employees. The main thing is understanding that we are the greatest nation in the world, and we have the ability to make nuanced policy, and that we are lifting people up out of poverty, evaluating the federal poverty guidelines, for example, bringing those into the 21st century. And so making sure that systemic injustices are in some way righted, through small business loans and through grants and through licenses, so that people who have been traditionally left out of the entrepreneurship are able to invest in there and build for their families into the future.
Yeah. One of the most biggest challenges that we face as a country right now is the issues of race and policing. What's your stance on this time? And, what do you think we can do to solve some of these issues?
Aisha, I'm sorry. Can you repeat your question?
Sure. One of the biggest challenges we face is, of course, the issue of race and policing.
Yes.
What's your stance on these issues, and how do we solve some of these problems?
Oh, yeah. So I think, like millions of Americans, every time I hear about someone losing their life, especially at the hands of our government, that weighs heavily on my mind. I do think that we need to be looking at some sort of sensible reform, but we don't need to be looking at we need to be careful about knee-jerk reactions. One of the main reasons that I'm actually running is to go after some of those more federal laws, or change things more at a federal level that will have a broader impact for racial justice. About 7 years ago, I'm not sure if you know this, I did a candlelight vigil downtown Asheville after a police killing And I did a press release. I proposed a number of solutions because, again, I'm solution oriented. I don't just point out the problems, right? I point out the problems maybe, but let's fix them, right? So I gave a number of solutions, and one of those was increased law enforcement training in mental health and de-escalation, and helping them understand, what it's like for people that are enduring a mental health crisis. And so, and this is what makes me different than some of my opponents, is that I don't just show up when things are popular. I've been kind of behind the scenes working on the ground. And then I went and started training police officers in mental health, de-escalation, and have done that for the past 7 years, and proud to do that. Just like what you said, we need more resources in the fact of training and social work help in embeddedness, and just making sure that we're not passing knee-jerk reaction laws that may make the community less safe.
So you actually got a question from Crystal G. And Crystal's question was, what are your ideas on how to improve healthcare access? But I happen to know that you don't believe in Medicaid for all. So can you talk about how to expand that, what your ideas to improve that, and how you're going to achieve all of that?
Yes, I absolutely agree that every single person should have healthcare and mental health care. However, I do believe that we need to build up our infrastructure and be stepwise in how we get there. I also believe that people would want to have a choice in that healthcare. And I do agree that right now we have less freedom because we don't have the choice to actually have healthcare, right? But if we passed, and another issue is, so to get to the question, Crystal's question, is first of all, increasing and making sure that every single nurse, PA, nurse practitioner, medical resident, licensed clinical social worker, licensed psychologist is practicing to the full extent of their license. We have many licensed psychologists and licensed clinical social workers that are discharge planning. That is not what that license is for. And so we can increase access and care there. Also, if we increase team-based care, so if we had pharmacists, nurses, behavioral health specialists, MDs, nurses, one study from an expert out of UNC Chapel Hill suggested that we wouldn't even need to really increase like a Medicare for all if we just increase team-based care. Some other fixes to the problem is that if we could bill for psychosocial issues that actually like feed into health issues, right? So let me give you an example.
Like race, right? Like if I could come to you for being Black and be like, it's hard out here, Bo. I want to talk to a psychologist, and then you could help do some behavior modification, all the stuff you do at your private practice.
Without like pathologizing it. Yeah. But even deeper though. Let's say you have asthma. You keep coming in, you keep having asthma attacks, but what you really need is a new filtration system in your house, right? Well, right now we can't bill the insurance company for that new filtration system. So what happens? You keep coming in and out, which creates a burden on our healthcare center. So if we could have a social worker say, do that assessment, do that environmental assessment, right? Oh, wow, look, it looks like, you need a new filtration system. Let's bill that to $300. Let's get this in. Boom, asthma clears up, burden on the healthcare center. And we start looking at those social determinants that really feed into health. And then at the same time, we start looking at the high schools and the medical schools and making sure that we're building up the workforce so that when we do start moving towards, where everybody will have access to a public option, that will be able to compete with the private companies and that will do an even better job we will have the infrastructure to deliver quality services.
That's really powerful and interesting, right? I tell you, I keep coming back to where these social determinants of health just keep showing up across the board as really the primary root cause of so many issues. So very interesting.
Talking my language now, and those are the easy fixes that we can get to if somebody is willing to do that without overhauling the whole system, right out the gate.
Very, very interesting approach. We've talked a lot tonight about the issues. Now I'm ready to talk about the man behind the issues. So tell us about you. I guess the main question is, are you married? Children? Tell us about it.
Yeah. So actually, like many people in the world, and I'm single right now in between relationships. But hopefully, someday when I find the right person, I will get married and possibly even have children. Right now, I have a 9-month-old puppy who's like keeping me busy, much like a toddler would. And but he's awesome. But no, single. And so, just
So
really.
What do you do in your spare time? How do you hang out in Western North Carolina? What do you do?
Gosh. I like to do a lot, like to be out and about. I'm big into, my work. I love being outdoors. I love hiking. I love training my dog. I love, I've gotten into Muay Thai fighting as like a mindful martial art.
Oh, wow.
I have, do a lot of just mindfulness practice. Just really work out. I stay pretty active, hang out with friends, go out to eat,
Well, I mean, you have to tell us, what's your favorite hike in town?
Oh, I love the ones that are over out in like Montreat. Those are pretty great hikes that aren't too strenuous, so you can take people who are visiting WNC, but it's beautiful out there.
And I did want to ask you this question. It's kind of business, but it's more of a personality question. A lot of people would have suggested that you start at city council level, but you're all the way here at the federal level. What made you do that?
Yeah. So it goes back to what I was saying in the beginning. A lot of the things that, just frustration, honestly, frustration at the lack of representation that we have, seeing solutions, writing to the congressman, writing to the city council people, the commissioners, not hearing anything back or saying, we don't have money for that, it's not in our budget, or whatever it may be. And really eyeing these systemic changes. And that's one thing that kind of sets me apart, is I see things more in systems. So I'm like, let's go for, why not? I'm not going to listen to that voice, the voice in my head too, that says, are you sure you want to do this? Because again, I think everyday working people who understand what it's like should be running for Congress and representing everyday working people.
Yeah. So I have had such a good time talking to you, but I have to ask like a weird question before I go. I always have to ask a question like a get to know you question. So my weird question before we leave here is like, do you have any hidden talents that we should know about?
Any hidden talents? I play the drums. Yeah, I love playing drums. I'm a poet. I love, writing poems and performing them with my drums. Pretty athletic.
Wow. Creative.
But yeah, I mean, I don't know of hidden talents. I guess those are more out in the open talents. But things that people might not know about me. I love to just be with the community. I love to just be a human. I'm so grateful to be alive and just, even having this moment, it's awesome. And so thank you.
Well, I have had such a great time tonight getting to know you better. You're definitely on my radar. Your platform seems super interesting. And I'm super excited just about the passion behind this work and the realness that you bring to this process. I just think it's going to be great for our community. It's going to be an amazing election season. And I just can't wait to see you over there and to do this. And so amazing. So thank you so much. I think we've taken all the questions in the audience, and it's been a great time.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
My mom was a social worker. My dad served in the Air Force. And like them, I felt called to public service. I am a licensed clinical social worker. I help people who are at their most vulnerable. Even before the pandemic, low wages, lack of opportunity, and the rising cost of healthcare and housing pushed people into despair. And then the pandemic hit. People are lapsing into addiction. Families are being evicted. The first responders I treat share their pain and exhaustion with me. My job is to listen and work with people who want to improve their lives. I found myself asking, who else is listening? Who can we count on to find solutions? That's when I decided to run for Congress. You can count on me to serve all the people of Western North Carolina, to work every day to find meaningful solutions to improve lives. I'm Hess, and I approve this message because the people of Western North Carolina deserve a representative that listens to them.